A powerful earthquake with a magnitude of 9.5 on the Richter scale instantly turned the city into ruins. The events unfold in Norway, where a terrible tsunami hit a tourist village, claiming the lives of 250 people. Geologist Christian Eekjord is declared a hero for his courage and bravery in rescuing people during this natural disaster, and he is invited to appear on television. 3 years have passed since the tragic events, and Christian's life has taken a turn for the worse. He is on the verge of divorce with his estranged wife Idun and decides to lead a reclusive life in the tsunami-affected village. Christian's daughter, Julia, visits her father, hoping that he has found solace and is ready to come back home. However, Julia makes an unpleasant discovery as she finds a secret room in Christian's house dedicated to the events and victims of the tsunami. Christian considers himself responsible for what had happened and blames himself for not being able to prevent the tragedy. The next morning, to lift her father's spirits, Julia prepares breakfast for him. Christian realizes that in his current state, he is not able to provide the care and attention that his daughter deserves. He insists that she immediately return to Oslo to her mother and sees her off on the nearest ferry. As Julia departs, she sadly observes her father crying, leaning over her forgotten sweater. Overwhelmed, Christian returns home and lies motionless on the floor until late in the evening. He decides to turn on the news, where he learns about the death of fellow geologist Konrad Lindblom due to a tunnel collapse in Oslo. Christian recalls that the day before the accident, Konrad had called him, but he didn't pick up the phone. A bad premonition torments the geologist, and he finally decides to open the envelope from Konrad, which he had also previously ignored. In it, he discovers his colleague's research indicating seismic activity that caused a chain of natural disasters in the Oslo area. In his manuscripts, Konrad expressed concern about the possibility of a new earthquake in the capital, similar to the one that occurred 100 years ago. Christian spends a sleepless night, consumed by anxious thoughts. He realizes that he now has a chance to redeem his guilt and warn the population about a new natural catastrophe. Early in the morning, he boards a train to Oslo and heads to the Seismic Monitoring Center. There, he meets with the head, Johannes Loberg, and tells him about Konrad's research. Johannes assures him that the seismic activity the geologist was concerned about was caused by construction explosions throughout the city. However, Christian is not convinced by his arguments. The situation motivates Christian to pull himself together and conduct his own research. He visits Konrad's home, where he meets his daughter, Marit. Entering the late colleague's office, Christian freezes in amazement. The entire room is dedicated to Konrad's years of research, which he spent most of his life on. Among them, Christian finds samples of city rock and a map displaying significant seismic activity. These findings confirm Christian's concerns about the possibility of a new earthquake and cast doubt on Johannes' earlier monitoring justifications. Christian calls him to clarify the locations of construction work in the city and compare this information with the marks on the map. Johannes reluctantly promises to contact construction contractors to get additional information. Gathering courage, Christian decides to visit his family. The meeting with his son Sondre and his girlfriend Mia is accompanied by an awkward conversation, after which the couple goes to the movies. Christian greets his wife and returns the sweater that Julia forgot at his house. During the exchange of pleasantries, Idun tells Christian about their daughter's ballet lessons and invites him to attend her recital. After a long time, Christian and Idun discuss their separation. The geologist intends to share his concerns with his wife, but at that moment, the power goes out in the apartment for the second time in a week. The spouses head to the basement to check the electrical panel. At that moment, Idun notices that the room is too stuffy, causing concern for the geologist. Suddenly, rats jump at them, frightening Idun. Christian tries to explain possible reasons for the malfunctions, but due to stress, she is not ready to listen. The next morning, Christian returns to Konrad's house to take another look at his research. Marit enters the office, and Christian shares his worries about a possible earthquake. She responds to this information with skepticism since her father had been consumed by his obsessive thoughts about an impending threat all his life, neglecting the family. Christian understands the motivation behind his colleague's actions, as he aimed to save hundreds of innocent lives. He asks Marit to take him to the Oslofjord tunnel where her father passed away. Initially hesitant, she eventually agrees to the trip to unravel the mystery of his final research. Upon reaching the site, they make their way through the debris of the collapsed tunnel. Christian discovers a drilling device in the rock, which Konrad used to extract a fresh sample of mountain rock. The geologist takes the core with him for further study. Meanwhile, Julia rehearses for her solo concert, unsuccessfully scanning the audience for her father. Disappointed, Idun calls her husband to find out why he is late for their daughter's performance. During the nervous conversation, Christian accidentally touches the mountain rock sample and realizes that the ground beneath Oslo is exceptionally weak. Suddenly, darkness envelops the entire city. Near the Oslo Opera House, powerful underground tremors begin. Idun hangs up the phone and rushes to Julia, who is held hostage in the crumbling building. Fortunately, the girl is unharmed, and they manage to successfully get her outside. When Johannes and his team arrive to inspect the damage, Christian, in a rage, charges towards him. He smashes a core sample into the ground, demonstrating to the supervisor the terrible condition of the soil beneath the city. However, Johannes insists that the collapse occurred due to the decay of the support beams of the opera house. He dismisses the geologist, once again stating that his concerns are unfounded. Late in the evening, Christian returns home to his family to apologize for missing the recital. With tears in her eyes, Idun tries to find out what has been tormenting her husband all these years. Together, they experienced a horrific tsunami in which Christian saved many lives. However, after the tragedy, the geologist distanced himself from his family, leaving them alone. Christian finally breaks down and reveals that he constantly expects the next disaster. His voice reflects helplessness and anxiety. Unable to contain his emotions, he starts crying. Idun, sensing his pain, embraces him, and they spend the night together, finding support in each other. A new day arrives. The children are surprised to find their father in the kitchen. Happy Julia rushes to him for a hug, hoping that things will now improve. Idun goes to work at Radisson Blue Plaza Hotel, and Sondre heads to the University of Oslo. Meanwhile, at the Seismic Activity Research Center, there is a flurry of activity as authorities are concerned about the collapse of the opera house and turn to researchers for explanations. Johannes claims that the cause lies in explosive devices during repair work, but fresh monitoring system data indicates otherwise. Marit discovers a disturbing video on her father's computer and goes home to Christian to share her findings. The recording shows Conrad using rats to study his theories, and all the rats died from exposure to toxic gas. The worried geologist shows Marit photos of lifeless animal bodies that were also poisoned by gas before the earthquake that occurred 100 years ago. The geologist, with horror, comes to the conclusion that Oslo is inevitably facing a powerful earthquake with a magnitude of up to 9.5 on the Richter scale, and that the tragic collapse, which claimed Conrad's life, is just a harbinger of the impending catastrophe. Christian, Julia, and Marit rush to the Radisson Blue Hotel to warn Idun of the danger. Christian tries to reach his wife, but she is in a conversation with a colleague and ignores his call. Meanwhile, Julia starts to panic, sensing a repeat of a global catastrophe. The father tries to calm the girl, but he is just as frightened. He attempts to contact Sondre, but he is in class and ignores the call due to the strict gaze of the instructor. Christian decides to call a fake bomb threat to initiate the evacuation of students. Meanwhile, Marit arrives at the hotel, and Christian hastily sets out in search of Idun. Julia rushes to her father, begging him not to leave, but he insists that she stays in the car and waits for him. At the reception, Christian learns that his wife is on the top floor of the building. Christian quickly enters the elevator and, trying to steady his trembling hands, contacts Johannes. He warns him that an earthquake will start at any moment, insisting that he urgently notify all necessary services. But before they can finish the conversation, the monitoring system signals danger. Meanwhile, an alarm sounds at the university, startling all students. Sondre starts gathering his things, but the signal abruptly cuts off, and the teacher, as if nothing happened, continues the lecture. The truck driver aggressively honks at Marit, demanding parking space. Irritated, she gets out of the car to clarify the situation with the man. Taking advantage of the moment, Julia quietly escapes, setting out to find her parents. Marit sees her entering the elevator to the top floor and runs after her. Christian finds Idun on the 34th floor and tries to convince her to leave the building immediately. His wife skeptically dismisses his words, claiming that if there was a real threat, the authorities would have already notified the public. Christian forcibly makes her go to the elevator and activates the fire alarm to force everyone else to evacuate. Before the elevator doors can close, the parents see their daughter entering the room. Due to the activated fire alarm, the elevator automatically descends to the first floor, and Christian doesn't manage to retrieve Julia in time. Overwhelmed by a sense of impending doom, Sondre tries to convince everyone to leave the auditorium, but his plea is ignored. At the same time, the lights go out in the hotel, and communication is lost, leaving Idun and Christian trapped in the elevator. Julia and Marit, on the open terrace, witness a powerful tremor that instantly sinks a large part of the city underground. Marit reacts quickly, shielding Julia from the shockwave. The elevator, containing Christian and Idun, starts to plummet under the impact of the strong tremor but abruptly stops. Christian regains consciousness first after the fall and tries to revive his wife, who is in a more critical condition. In a state of shock, Idun finds an escape from the elevator through a small opening in the ceiling. Together with Christian, they climb the maintenance ladder to reach the top floor of the elevator shaft and find their daughter. Meanwhile, Marit regains consciousness but doesn't find Julia nearby. Soon, she discovers the girl near a hotel staff member who is pinned under debris. The woman is still alive but has sustained severe injuries, and Julia tries to ease her suffering. As the building continues to collapse, Marit decides to free the hotel staff member from the debris before the next collapse begins. Sandre and his girlfriend manage to survive the earthquake. Unfortunately, not everyone is as lucky, and they discover the body of the professor who earlier refused to evacuate the students. Marit tries to administer first aid to the hotel staff member using the available resources. However, at that moment, a new horrifying scene unfolds before her. In panic, Marit rushes to Julia and the injured girl, trying to evacuate them as quickly as possible. However, the adjacent collapsed building falls directly onto the hotel, causing even greater destruction. The building slowly begins to sink into the ground. Marit and Julia manage to grab onto the bar counter, while a hotel employee is thrown outside through the newly formed crack in the wall. Debris, thrown by the shocks, falls into the elevator shaft and severely injures Idune's leg. She manages to hold on, but she is unable to climb further up the stairs on her own. The spouses discover a slightly open elevator door near the 30th floor. Christian decides to take the risk and use a cut elevator cable to reach the opening. The first attempt proves unsuccessful, and the man barely avoids falling down. However, on the second try, everything works out, and he instructs his wife to follow his lead. Injured and weakened, Idune hangs on the cable, unable to climb up to reach the opening. The woman is ready to give up and instructs Christian to go in search of Julia without her. He refuses to abandon his beloved and persuades her with all his strength to climb back up. It seems that the spouses are about to reunite, but at that moment, the elevator from above breaks off and takes the woman with it. Devastated by the loss of his wife, Christian collapses to the floor. However, he cannot let his emotions take over, as his daughter is still in danger. The geologist climbs up the service ladder, encountering injured people along the way. Finally, he finds Julia and Marit, who have taken cover behind the bar counter. Christian hugs his daughter and delivers the sad news about her mother. As they attempt to leave, due to the last jolt, Julia loses her grip and slides down the floor. Christian jumps after her, pushing her aside, but in doing so, he hits a concrete wall hard and temporarily loses consciousness. Coming to his senses, he discovers Julia on a cracked window. The frightened girl desperately calls for help. The situation becomes critical. The building is dangerously tilting, and new cracks rapidly form on the glass beneath Julia. Holding onto chairs, Marit cautiously descends to help the girl. One of the debris flies straight at Julia, but Christian manages to grab his daughter in time. Now, both of them hang on the edge of the abyss, at risk of falling at any moment. Marit is overcome with panic at the sight, but Christian's voice brings her to her senses. She grabs the long lamp cord and descends to the right side of Julia. Christian warns his daughter that he will toss her to Marit, and she must grab onto her. Due to fear, Julia is hesitant to let go of her father and hangs over the abyss. Eventually, after Christian's persuasion, the girl follows his instructions, and Marit pulls her back into the room. With their last strength, the trio climbs up to the exit and successfully makes their way out of the hotel. Outside, they are met with a city completely devastated. After their rescue, Marit enters Conrad's office and discovers that it is almost destroyed, except for a photograph of her as a child with her father. The reunited Christian, Julia, and Sandre arrive at their old home in Garanger by ferry. The geologist did everything possible to prevent the catastrophe, but he was not given a chance to warn the people. Now, a more important mission rests on his shoulders, taking care of his own family. In the final scenes, it is explained that Norway experiences the strongest seismic activity north of the Alps and that a powerful earthquake is expected in the near future, but it is unknown when it will occur. It's unfortunate that the movie The Quake concludes on such a tragic note. One would hope that in the face of natural disasters, timely warnings can be issued to prevent human casualties. Share your thoughts on the film in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel.